by 1930 is the decade where Bali start to get documented in the form of book, in the form of novel, in the form of illustration, in the form of painting, in the form of composed music. And it's all done not only by the people but also by the visitors. And most of the visitors that come to Bali during the 1930s are very well-known celebrities and artists. Hi, my name is Panji Wisrawan. I'm the head mixologist of Aperitif. So Aperitif is a fine dining restaurant that located in Ubud of the island of Bali and based on the country of Indonesia. So I'm gonna make to you today, of course, since the name of the bar is aperitif, we're gonna make an aperitif cocktail. And we believe that the king of the aperitif cocktail is the almighty Negroni. So when we first opened in 2018, we trying to introduce people about the essence of aperitif. And at that time, people are not as informed as now about Negroni. So what we're trying to do back then is trying to create a Negroni that people can drink, because Negroni is something that has a very mature flavor where it's bitter, but it's also sweet. It's something that really, like can tease your palate before you having your actual meal. And this recipe has been around since the beginning of aperitif. We're trying to keep the soul of aperitif as the name is aperitif, but also we're trying to use as many as possible local ingredients. And also we're trying to implement a lot of technique here also through the making. Of course, so as many of, as you know, like Negroni is a stir cocktail. So we're using gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth. So here we'll do a little bit of tweaking. So what we do with the gin, we infuse it with tamarillo. So tamarillo is a type of vegetable slash fruit that has a very nice bitter tart flavor and very aromatic and fruity. So what we do with the blend it with the gin, and then we mix it with some a dash of pectinex. So pectinex is an enzyme. It's taken from local potato. So the pectinex itself has this tendency to separate the liquid from the solid. So what we get here is a very nice colored gin, and where particularly we use Roku, since Roku is not your typical London dry gin. It has a very nice aromatic and citrusy flavor, and I believe it works really well with the tamarillo without overpowering the tamarillo flavor with the juniper flavor. And of course we use Campari because there is no Negroni without Campari. And instead of using sweet vermouth, we're using an aperitivo from Italy called Cocchi Americano Rosa. So it has a very nice floral flavor, but it's not overly sweet. It's also gonna give this nice tweak on the classic Negroni. And the last one that we're very proud of is our lacto-ferment strawberry over here. So what we do is, as I mentioned before, we're trying to implement a lot of kitchen technique. So we do a little bit of lacto-fermenting over here. So what we do is like we ferment 1 kilos of strawberry with the help of Tejapula salt. So Tejapula salt is a local salt that made in Tejapula area, which is in the eastern part of Bali. So it has a very nice natural help without overly salty. So it really helps on creating a signature flavor of our Negroni. And also because our strawberry is not sweet, it grows in Bali, it has different soil, so it tends to be a little bit more sour. So we did a little bit of, after 7 days of fermentation, we did a little bit of digesting with a little bit honey and some acid, like lactic acid, to keep the life source longer. I think I should make you one. How about that? Okay, so we start with the gin first. We're gonna do 20 ml. Okay. So we already put the mixing glass in the freezer, so it's already cold. And then Campari, 20 ml. Okay. It's gonna be a little bit more different with the local, with the usual classic Negroni, where the color is a little bit more on the brown side. So this is gonna be really red. You know, when you serve drink that red, it really make you anticipate on how good the cocktail is, because red is just like the color that you want to have in your drink. So last one is 15 ml of lacto ferment strawberry. Because we're gonna put ice in it. Okay, here we go. Then we get all the ingredients in it. We're gonna stir. We're just gonna stir it just enough to make sure that the drink is not over diluted, because Bali is a pretty humid place. Ice tend to dilute easily here. Okay, good. So we're gonna serve it in the off glass filled with block ice. It's something that also becoming a common thing when you serve spirit forward cocktail using block ice, and also very chilled glass. As I mentioned before, it's very humid here. We're trying to keep the cocktail chilled as long as possible. So it's very helpful when you're serving it in a very nice chilled glass with a nice block. And it's also look prettier if you serve it in a nice block. Okay. As you can see, it has a very nice pink red color. So not only having the classic flavor of the Negroni, which is bitter and sweet, it also have this little tweak of acidity which come from the Tamarillo that we already infused with the Roku, and also from the lacto ferment strawberry. So it's a pretty playful, I would say, and people that maybe not yet know about Negroni wouldn't be afraid to try Negroni, because usually, I mean, it's something that very common now that they like Negroni because it's so, it's so cool, it's so trendy. But this is something that really resembles the spirit of aperitif. One last thing, we're gonna just did a little bit of just put the ice. When you drink the cocktail and you see the ice nicely shaped, and then you see the logos of the bar, and every sip they always see this, something that, I hope that they keep remembering aperitif. If they want to have a good Negroni, they know that they have to go to aperitif. And one last thing, so we have this little garnish. This is called pat de fruit. This is a little candy that, again, something that we learned from the kitchen of aperitif. What we do here is like, from the leftover of the making of the Tamarillo infused Roku gin and the lacto ferment, we collect all the residue, and we cook it with some gelatin and some other technique to create a little candy over here that you can enjoy together with the Negroni. So it's something that also, again, without being too serious about our craft, we also trying to be a little bit more playful by creating something little tiny like this that people can enjoy together with their drink. We're gonna serve it on the top of the cocktail, and voila, this is our Nightshade Negroni. So when you drink Negroni, the aftertaste is always bitter. But here, you're not only getting the bitter flavor which come from the Campari, but also from the Tamarillo. As I mentioned, Tamarillo is a little bit bitter, a little bit tart, but also fruity. You're gonna get a long-lasting Tamarillo flavor after you drink it. But also, you get this acidity that comes from the lacto ferment. So I think it's a very complex Negroni, which we try to still keep the essence of a Negroni to be bittersweet, but also we try to make it a little bit more playful, a little bit more acceptable, and also showcasing the ingredient that we have in Bali. infusion is easy. So if you don't have Patinex, I would suggest you just do infusion. So if you're lucky enough to find Tamarillo, wherever you are, make sure that you cut it into wedges. The shape is like the shape of American football. If you aware with it, so just make sure you cut it into 4 pieces in the shape of wedges, and you just do a cold infusion. Put that in the jar that big enough to contain all the fruits and the gin. So literally for one bottle of infusion of gin, I usually just use 300. So it's almost half of the bottle. Be aware if you're gonna do infusion with Tamarillo that you're gonna lose some of your liquid from the gin because it being absorbed. But it's also another thing because well, when you infuse the Tamarillo with the gin, the Tamarillo gonna have the flavor of the gin. So it's something that you can play around, like what I did here. So because I have this Tamarillo flavor that have the flavor of the gin, I turned it into a candy. So the candy is also not only sweet, but also have the flavor of Tamarillo and with a hint of gin and also a little bit of sourness from the lacto-fermented strawberry. It's almost kind of like zero waste cocktail. It's not only creating an even more experience, but also like it's like cutting costs. Also, it's very good for the business when you can use as much as possible the ingredient from one product or one ingredient. For the infusion, I would say you leave it for a night. I think a night is enough. So, but if you 6 hours is good, but better leave it for a night. Oh, the fermenting idea is actually not. It could be a little bit challenging because you probably need some equipment that you want to use. But I believe out using those equipment, you can also find a way to ferment stuff. For example, like strawberry, it's pretty easy. You just find a strawberry that you're liking and then just do the measurement. The 2% of the total amount of the strawberry, that's gonna be the amount of salt that you're gonna use. So here what we do is we're using vacuum bag, and we have the machine also to vacuum. So it will really help the process of the fermentation. But if you don't have that, don't worry. You can just use a jar and then just make sure that the jar is clean and well sanitized. So just to make sure that there is no other bacteria that gonna affect the flavor of the fermentation later. And also, it's very important that you make sure that all the strawberries are to be as tight as possible. So what they do usually is just you put a bag of water just to press down the strawberry. How I get into this is from a book called The Art of Fermentation from one of the best restaurants in the world called Noma. So I learned a lot about the fermentation technique from that book. So I would really recommend to people that want to try to do fermentation at home by reading that book because that book is really helping people that doing fermentation in professional scale like us, but also for people that wants to do fermentation at home. So we really like to connect Bali on the 1930 with the theme of the bar itself. We are a cocktail concept-based bar where every cocktail are using a lot of techniques in it. Especially we work side by side with the Aperitif kitchen, where we implement a lot of kitchen technique here. Especially we have a lot of kitchen equipment that really help the developing of cocktail program in Aperitif Bar. And not only that, this is also our attempt to introduce Indonesia with the cocktail culture by introducing some of the classic or the twist on the classic. And from here on, we're trying to, make people in Indonesia starting to enjoy cocktail. So it's kind of, like trying to change the concept of going to the bar, not only having fun, but also getting a whole experience of having a great time, having great fun, having a great cocktail, and having a great hospitality and service. The most famous one that came to Bali on the 1930s are Charlie Chaplin. So believe it or not, Charlie Chaplin was in Bali on the 1930s. Yes, he was. I believe he was on the trip to visit one of his in-laws in Australia. And when he was in Bali, he was hosted by the Prince of Ubud, named Chok Gede Agung Sukawati, and also by the painter, the famous primitivist painter called Walter Spies. So these two, the Prince of Chok Gede Agung and Walter Spies, is the one that kind of like hosting all these famous names when they come to Bali. So many other than that, we have also Noel Coward, which is also a director, which is a good friend with Charlie Chaplin, and also Barbara Hutton, which is an American heiress, very well known as a philanthropist and a very rich woman, one of the most powerful women in that decade. And other than that, we also have many other celebrities and artists that come, such as the illustrator Miguel Covarrubias, a Mexican illustrator that creating an illustrated book about Bali. That the book itself creating a craze of Bali, like because 1930s, although 1920s is very well known as a roaring 20s, like the great decades, 1930s, unfortunately, is very well remembered as the Depression era. So it is something that push everyone to like especially the Westerners to find a new paradise or a new heaven. And at that time, they found Bali as the place of the new heaven. Most of the influence of 1930s, of course, it's we try to connect the big story of every from each character. For example, Charlie Chaplin, there was one cocktail recipe of Charlie Chaplin. So what we're trying to do is by trying to find a connection. For example, like Charlie Chaplin, they have a classic Charlie Chaplin. So we did a little bit of a twist on that. Since Charlie Chaplin cocktail are using sloe gin, which sloe gin is not really common in Bali. And then they're using apricot brandy and lime juice. You can imagine it's like a gin sour with a hint of fruitiness. Here we try to tweak it a little bit, give a little bit of a tropical touch in it. Since he's in Bali and the cocktail is served in Bali, we try to use rum instead of sloe gin. And then we use apricot brandy still there, and then we also use a little bit of coconut water. So we make it a little bit long drink, kind of the soul of the Charlie Chaplin cocktail is still there, but we give a lot of tropical touch in it. Not only that, we look at the creation of each person. For example, Walter Spies. Walter Spies is a primitivist painter. So he's a painter, and one of the famous painting that he created is called Iseh in the Morning Light. So what we're trying to reconnect here is morning. Morning in Bali, people usually have rice and coffee as a breakfast in the morning. So what we're trying to create here is like we mix coffee with rum and whiskey and mix it with some pandan. So pandan is one of the local herbs that grows a lot in Southeast Asia. Made the pandan into a syrup and mix it with passion fruit, as we need something to balance the cocktail with something sour, but we try to be more tropical here. So instead of using the classic sour source such as lemon or lime, we use passion fruit, which is for us is sour enough to balance the cocktail. And then not only that, we also trying to implement some of the heritage that we have. For example, like in Bali, we usually cook the rice with coconut milk and lemongrass and bay leaf. So we use that mixture to clarify the previous mixture that I've mentioned before. So all the coffee, the rum, the whiskey, the pandan syrup, and the passion fruit was mixed all together, and then we drop it out to the coconut milk where we already cook, and we let it sit for over a night where the mixture starting to curdle, and then the next day we clarified it using coffee filter. It resulted to be a very clear liquid, but has a lot of flavor in it. And so for the final touch for the cocktail, we use a little bit of pandan paint, which is in the green color. So it's a little pay homage to the heritage of Walter Spies itself as a painter. So it's something that people always recognize. Oh, okay, Walter Spies is a painter. So there is a paint there that symbolizes him. And then also we try to use so many cocktail making technique. And not only that, we try to be relevant also by being sustainable. So one of the things that we use to do is after the clarification done, we take all the caldron and then we just wrap it up with some chocolate, making it like a little praline that they can enjoy together with the cocktail.